Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Ask Zajef ITTO edition. Just like every other Ask Zajef, I've asked you guys to send me your questions. Now, for the character-specific ones, I always do it in a community post, so if you're interested in asking questions for the next Ask Zajef, make sure you... I mean, honestly, I don't even know if there's a way... Maybe if you click the bell, you get notifications for community posts. I don't even know, actually, but... You know, all the usual. Subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment, leave a like, woohoo. Check me out on Twitch, all that. So, we have a compiled list of 20 non-repeated questions, thanks to one of my mods. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through all of these questions. Let's start at the beginning. The first question, first things first, overall power level and pull value compared to other units, to get that out of the way. Okay, Itto's a very hard unit to evaluate. The biggest reason why he's very hard to evaluate is that so much of his power is dependent on his supports. And unlike a lot of other carries, his supports are not universal. So if you don't want to get Itto, you don't have those supports. And if you haven't tried to get Itto before, you probably don't have those supports either. Or at least, maybe not all of them, maybe not all the stuff that you need on them. The biggest one is Goro. Playing Itto without Goro is very painful. And as you guys can see, on the account I was lent, we don't have Goro. The reality is, when it comes to 4-star characters, it's actually very hard to guarantee you get them. Actually, you can't guarantee you get them, but it's pretty reasonable amount of people that will just not, if they go for Itto, get a Goro constellation. Or get a Goro, sorry. And then when it comes to constellations, you're more likely to get C2 Itto than C6 Goro. Now, that's not going to be the case for everyone, but point being, it's very hard to get a specific 4-star that is not in the shop rotation, that has not been present on many banners yet. And that's the case with Goro. Goro's only ever been on Itto banners. That's it. So right now, I would say that the amount of people that have C6 Goro and that have C0 Itto is probably like very, very small. Probably less than 1% of Itto owners. Because if you did enough wishes to get C6 Goro, you've probably done enough wishes to get a constellation or two on Itto as well. But because Itto's so dependent on Goro as a baseline, because Itto gets so much power from Goro's C6, it is very hard to evaluate his power level compared to other units that don't have those requirements. If we just ignore that altogether, and we assume that you just have C6 Goro and you have Albedo and you have Zhongli, you have Itto's like general best team, then Itto's one of the best carries. I wouldn't quite put him on the same level as something like Ayaka or Raiden, but like pretty close. Pretty high up there. But if you don't have those things, then, you know, he's closer to like, I don't want to say a specific unit because I'm just gonna get molding mains in the comments, but he's not nearly as good, right? I consider Itto's power level, like overall, to average out around Xiao level. Or if you have everything you need to make him work, he's better. But if you don't, he's generally worse. When it comes to his pull value, it's the same idea, where his pull value depends on whether or not you have his supports. If you have his supports, he's one of the best pulls in the game because the supports that he wants, the supports that he synergizes with, are supports that you don't really want to run in other teams, right? You're not going to run Goro on your Hu Tao team. And so, because he's reliant on supports that are different from other carries, having a built Itto and his supports basically means you can build whatever team you want on the other side without getting punished. You can use all of your good units together and then your Itto on the other side with all of his supports. His pull value and his power are also very much influenced by whether or not you have Albedo. Albedo is just really, really good with Itto because, well, not only does he help with Itto's energy costs, you're putting Goro on your team in order to hyper buff the fuck out of Itto, but all of Goro's buffs also buff Albedo. So by putting Albedo on the team, you're basically able to capitalize on Goro's buffs a lot more. And it's very, very nice. Overall, he's definitely a solid pull, but if you don't already have Goro, going for him is a little bit risky because you can't guarantee that you'll actually get your Goro. Question 2. Unit comparison. How does he measure up against comparable DPS units like Xiao and C6 Noelle, and the top meta ones like Ayaka and Ganyu? So I guess there's overlap with the overall power level question. I already talked about how I think that he overall averages out around the same level as Xiao, where if you have the supports you need to make him work, he's higher, and if you don't, he's lower. He's just better than C6 Noelle. He doesn't have the defensive stuff, so if you keep dying, then maybe Noelle's for you. And his AoE's not as big, but honestly, his damage is significantly better, so you're still better off using Itto. like by a lot. The thing is, Noel wants the same support pieces that Itto wants. So if you're in the situation where Itto's not that good, then Noel's even worse. That being said though, once you have all of the pieces to make Itto work, Noel becomes a pretty strong option as well. Not as good, like basically a strict downgrade to Itto, but still definitely good enough to clear content and stuff, right? And to top meta ones like Ayaka and Ganyu, it kind of depends on the situation, but one of the nice things about Itto is he's very, very versatile. His AoE is not particularly big, but it's not like nothing either. His single target is not the best in the game, but it's not bad either. The way he deals with multi-wave content isn't the best in the game because he doesn't have the biggest AoE and stuff, but because of the way his rotations work and because in Mono Geo teams you don't need to like swap back into your support to refresh buffs, then he also does pretty well in multi-wave content. So basically, Itto has a certain amount of versatility in terms of like the kind of content you can put him up against. Not in terms of team building, his teams are very strict, but in terms of the kind of content he can do, he's very versatile. And so you can kind of just, if you have an Itto team build, you can use him literally anywhere. Like the only like situation where you might not want to use him is if there's a lot of elemental shields, but even then, because his last team slot is somewhat flexible, right? His best team is generally Itto, Goro, Albedo, Zhongli, but the Zhongli spot is somewhat flexible and you can replace it with Shield Breaker if you need to, and you're not going to lose out on too much. How important is Albedo, Zhongli, and Goro in an Itto team? How impactful is Goro's C6 in an Itto team? Albedo and Goro are pretty fucking important. Zhongli's not so much, not too important, because he has a shield. It obviously helps you a lot with not dying if you struggle with that, but you can proc Geo Resonance just by putting literally any other element and getting Crystallized shields. That's not what Zhongli brings to the team. Zhongli kind of just gives a little bit of particles if his pillar hits, which is hard to do reliably, but still, and a little bit of resistance shred, but at the end of the day, he's not a great unit in Itto teams. You just put him there because we don't have an amazing other fourth slot, but you can get away with Fischl, you can get away with any healer, honestly. As I've said earlier, Albedo really helps capitalize on Goro's buffs, and when you don't have Albedo, your Itto team will feel a lot worse. It's still going to be functional, it's still going to be workable, but it will be a lot worse. If you don't have Goro, honestly, I don't know if I would recommend playing Itto at all. If you have Itto and Albedo but no Goro, then maybe. But if you have Itto and no Albedo, no Goro, that's just... But then again, right, Goro's on his banner, so you can't really know if you'll have Goro if you're planning on wishing for him. How impactful is Goro's C6? Quite a bit. We can calc it out like somewhat accurately. Crit value, crit multiplier, 98.4 plus, I don't know, like 200 plus, I don't know, maybe a Serpent Spine. Goro's C6 is about a 15% personal DPS increase on Itto, which is pretty big. The increase from Serpent Spine to Redhorn is about 13%. The increase from Goro's C6 is about 15%. Now, obviously, a lot of this is artifact dependent, and don't take this as like exactly 13% and exactly 15%. Effectively, you're gaining about as much from Itto's C6, from Goro's C6, as you are getting from getting Redhorn. Editor, for the C6 Goro, when I talk about a 15% increase, it's actually a 20% increase from Serpent Spine to Redhorn, which is a little bit better than the Goro's C6 by itself, but yeah. Team overview and alternatives that don't have Albedo and or Zhongli. The TLDR on non-Albedo and Zhongli team is you're always kind of coping. Doesn't necessarily mean that they won't perform well, but like compared to like the baseline Itto team, then they're like, eh. You can go for something like GOMC instead of Albedo. It's just not gonna be as good at all. Otherwise, you can always go for the typical Bennett channeling core, where you'd probably want to have your Goro and 4-piece Petra. Should perform pretty well. You can go for the double Hydro core, but because Itto does a lot of charge attacks, you're not getting a lot of value out of it, so I wouldn't recommend it. You can also just ditch the Goro altogether and play National with Itto. That's gonna work, it's just not gonna be better than National variations that use Anemo units instead. Does Albedo or Zhongli gain more pull value if you have Itto, or is it only the other way around? Zhongli, Alright, like I said earlier, Zhongli's nice for comfort, but I actually don't consider him to be particularly important. I don't actually consider him to be particularly important to Itto teams. Zhongli's pull value is always the same, which is if you need a shielder, he's the best pull in the game. If you don't need a shielder, he's like kind of fucking shit. Albedo, on the other hand, definitely gets better if you have Itto. He is a good unit, but he doesn't really bring anything new to an account. I've compared him to Flex Tape before. You got a hole in one of your teams, Flex Tape that shit. But like in Geo teams, he's more than that. In Geo teams, he's a significant portion of your team's DPS. But yeah, and similarly, Itto also gains in pull value if you have Albedo. Weapon overview, mainly questions about Wide Lion refinement scaling and Redhorn and Serpent Spine comparison against the other available options. Okay. White Blind is an incredibly good free-to-play option on him, which kind of makes it so that all of the other 4-star weapons are kind of shit. White Blind is so strong that all of the other 4-star weapons kind of just can't compete, and most of the other 5-star weapons also can't. You look at Unforged, Shielded, Wolf's Gravestone, Scoured Pride if you can't adjust your ER, Unforged, Not Shielded, Song of Broken Pines, all those weapons are just worse than White Blind. That being said, White Blind does make your first rotation a little bit weaker, because you're generally not going to get your White Blind stacks before you use your burst, and gaining defense after you use your burst doesn't become attack through your burst defense to attack conversion. This accounts for that, right? So this is on average over 3 rotations. Now, when it comes to the other weapon choices that you can have, I mean, I guess Black Clip Slasher, but honestly, I would never go for Black Clip Slasher on Itto. I would always just go for White Blind Refines over that. Scoured Pride, if you can't have enough ER in your artifacts, is actually going to be good. Like, if your really good artifacts all don't have a lot of ER, then Scoured Pride can be a competitive option. But otherwise, just stick to White Blind. Then finally, your other weapon options are Serpent Spine and Redhorn. Serpent Spine gets better with the more refines you have, obviously, but it's already really strong at Refinement 1. And then Redhorn is his best option. Basically, effectively, you should always run one of those 3 weapons. Redhorn, Serpent Spine, or White Blind. Maybe, perhaps, Scoured Pride in some instances. Talent priority overview, since the recommendation says burst first. Oh no, does it? Oh no. Of course it does. One talent level in your normal attack is a DPS increase of about 5%. A talent level on your burst is a DPS increase of about 3.5%, and a talent level on your skill is a DPS increase of about 1%. If you're looking for an optimal DPS increase on your Itto, the priority will always be normal attack, then burst, then skill. Now, that being said, there is a little bit more to this, which is basically 2 talent levels in your skill is still less than 1 talent level on your burst or on your normal attack. So it's not just that you want to prioritize your normal attack and burst, or normal attacks first, then burst, then skill. It's also that you might want to prioritize your normal attacks and burst over skill so much that you don't even level your skill. Well, not that you don't level it, but that you don't level it that much. The recommendations in this game, this is the worst feature they've ever implemented. Because instead of literally taking like 5 minutes to write down the right ones, they're just putting down the most popular ones. And as a general rule, most players don't theory craft. Artifact overview and stat priority. Example, Bullite versus Husk versus Mix and Match Itto. Oh, no. We have Husk Itto here. Now let's take a look at what happens if instead of Husk Itto, we go Bolide. We're losing out on 10% DPS, and we now have a conditional set instead of a just set that works all the time. Effectively, never fucking run Bolide Itto, please. Don't do that to yourself. Now, when it comes to stats, let's talk about stat scaling for a second. You look at a character like Albedo. Albedo's talents just directly scale with defense. When you look at his talent, right, it just says X defense. But as you can see, for Itto, that's not the case. We have his Ascension 4, that technically does this, but his Ascension 4 is not a significantly massive part of his damage. Most of the way that he scales with defense is by converting defense to attack. But what that means is, effectively, he still scales with attack. He still cares about Noblesse buffs, he still cares about Bennett, all that shit. However, when I use this burst, I get fucking over 3k attack. If you're on White Blind, If you're with Goro, you can get up to like 5k attack. In other words, Bennett's not that useful. But it's more than that. It's not just Bennett that's not that useful. It's also attack stats and defense stats. Just like when you have a Bennett on your team, attack sands and attack substats, all of those, right, become less valuable, then things that buff your attack also become less valuable, including stuff that buffs your defense and that gets converted to attack through that steroid itself. Let's take a look at how a defense increase on Itto affects his damage. For now, we're not going to look at his A4 because it's just going to make it more complicated and it's not really going to matter that much. So as you guys can see, right? With the Goro buff, with all that, right, your total attack on Serpent Spine is going to be about around 4k. On Wide Line, 5.5k. That's a lot of fucking attack. Let's look at how much that increases when you add a defense percent roll. One roll of defense percent, average is about 6.2 plus 6.2%. And the DPS increase between 1 and 1.4%. Let's compare that to a unit like Albedo. This is without Goro. We can look at with Goro afterwards. Well, what happens if on Albedo you were to gain a roll of defense, right? It's 2%. Even with Goro, it's still 1.6. It's still a bigger increase. Albedo with a defense weapon still gets a bigger increase out of defense subs than Itto with a crit weapon. Now, Itto doesn't want defense percent stats all that much, and he cares about crit stats a lot more, whereas Albedo still wants those defense percent stats. In Itto's case, his defense scaling is also quite a bit better than his attack scaling. So if you are to look at the difference between a defense roll and an attack roll, right? An attack roll is about 0.9. So basically, 3 attack rolls are about as worth as 2 defense rolls on Itto. They're not necessarily useless, but they're also not insane. So when it comes to the ER, it kind of depends on the team variation you have. Now, unfortunately, I don't have that much experience with Itto teams. I'm not sure I have enough to really talk on ER thresholds. Generally, you want to run Goro on Favonius Warbow and Zhongli on Favonius Lance if you are running 4 Geo. And then if you do both of those and you do your rotations right, I think you can get away with like 115, 120 ER if you have like Exile on Goro, yeah. But honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Constellation overview and how his cons affect his general playstyle. Okay, we can talk about this. Itto has pretty solid constellations overall. His C1 is good. Nothing more than that. It's noticeable, but realistically, you definitely don't need it. It is definitely quality of life. C2 can be nice, but as we said, right? In a lot of teams, you can get away with energy requirements on Itto if you play well. And, well, this, right? Let's say you do restore 18 energy. Your ER requirements are basically always going to be 0. You have enough ER basically no matter what. But if you then do play well, if you then do all the min-maxing things you can do to increase his energy generation, then you're generating more energy than you need. So in other words, the better you play, the less this actually affects Itto. It's still okay. It's still good, but it's not crazy. C3 is Ushi. I mean, it's Ushi, so you have to go for it. Realistically, C3 is not that good. As we talked about earlier, his skill is the least important of his talents, so it's the one that does the least. His C4, useful, but like, so irrelevant. It just doesn't do that much. C5, pretty useful, a nice DPS increase. C6 is really good, but also like, you have to go all the way to C6 to get it. It's fucking expensive. Don't spend money on this shit game, as usual. Effectively, right, Itto has pretty decent constellations overall. His C1, 2, 4, 5, 6 are all like noticeable increases, but they're not particularly significant before C6. And I don't think C6 is worth the money. How good is Redhorn as a general pull? It's not great. The biggest problem with Redhorn is there's not enough Claymore users, and there's Serpent Spine that exists. Realistically, if you're going for Itto, you're probably not going for Ella as well. If you like both of those characters, knock yourself out. In terms of pull effectiveness, definitely not amazing. Sayu's not great, Xinyan's Xinyan, Diluc's Diluc, Chongyun's Chongyun, Noel's just budget Itto, Beidou's good, and Razor. If you already have Serpent Spine and you get Redhorn, what are you gonna do with your Serpent Spine? Maybe put it on Beidou. But like, you could also get a second Serpent Spine if you're still using the Battle Pass. Basically, there's just not enough Claymore characters, or enough good Claymore characters, for me to really want to recommend pulling 4 5-star Claymores. Also, the official Genshin page announced the banner, announced the weapon banner and the character banner for Itto. And oh my fucking god, what is this? Memory of Dust? No, you do not want this. Stringless? It's okay. Lion's Roar can be good, but there's so many good swords. At the end of the day, you're probably not really going for it. Dragon's Bane, good, but like only really on Hu Tao. Kinda. Like, it's good on Shengling, but generally catches better, and if you're playing Rational, then it can be good, but like, even then, it's not insane. You can also still go Katane. It's not amazing. Lithic Blade is like, ugh. Sackfrog can be good. The 4-star weapon's like overall fine, but nothing crazy. But like the Memory of Dust is such a fucking bad weapon to get. And to those of you that are like, well, Hazo's coming out soon. Memory of Dust is gonna be great on Hazo. It's gonna be okay. But from what I've looked at, from what I've seen, it's really not looking that great for Memory of Dust. But yeah, so as a general pool, even just in a vacuum, Redhorn is okay, but not insane. But then in the context of how bad this banner is, I wouldn't recommend it at all. Only go for Redhorn if you have Itto, you like Itto, and you want to make your Itto deal more damage. And even then, going for Redhorn isn't as good as going for Albedo. Does Itto have a high skill cap? How does mastering his combos impact his overall DPS? There is a high skill ceiling on Itto. Doing his combos perfectly, because a lot of it is situation dependent and will depend on whether or not your Ushi gets attacked, then it can get relatively hard to play it perfectly. But even if you don't play it perfectly, even if you do Unga Bunga, it's not gonna make that much of a difference. So I would say yes, he does have a high skill cap because it is very difficult to play him perfectly, but also like it doesn't matter that much. I mean, obviously you have to charge attack, right? Like if you don't know you have to charge attack, like you're not gonna do very well, right? If you just do normal attacks on Itto and that's it, and you just never charge attack, then yeah, obviously you're gonna fucking struggle. As a general rule, right, attack until you see the Oni mask, and then charge attack. And then always make sure that you use your E once at the start of your burst, and once at the end of your burst. Now, I've been told that if you do an alt swap, so you can actually swap to a character either by clicking on their burst icon or by doing like the alt key plus a number, and it's gonna just cast their burst, right? I've been told that if you do that with Itto with Goro's buff, you're not actually gonna get the defense buff. And so if you want to make sure you actually get Goro's buff on Itto, what you want to do is you want to do your Goro QE, then Itto normal attack Q. As long as you do those things, you'll be fine-ish. Is he expensive to build in terms of teams, in terms of artifacts, stats, and our teammates? In terms of teammates, yes, Itto is probably one of the most expensive units to build, just because, right, as we talked about earlier, he cares about supports that other carries don't care about, which means it's less likely that you already have them. In terms of artifacts and stats, not really any more than other characters, right? Like, obviously, if you compare him to someone like Kokomi, yeah, he's expensive. Itto's, like, I guess somewhat a little bit easier to build because you have more good hits. You have defense and attack rather than just attack. But yeah, like, he's overall about the same as usual to build. In terms of artifact sets, though, like, it does force you to do the Husk domain, and if you don't have any characters that want to use Ocean Hued Clam, then it kind of sucks to have to do that. It's not particularly resin efficient compared to building a character that wants Emblem or Shiminawa's, because those sets are so useful in so many units. But yeah. Does Ushi generally hit harder than Zhongli's Meteor? In my experience, yes, but I also don't build my Zhongli all that much. But I think yes. I think he should. Right, like the scaling is a lot lower, but Itto's effective attack is a lot higher. Is Crystallize more of an afterthought in Itto teams, or can it be seriously considered as a shielding alternative for Geo-Resonance effect? Yeah, so Crystallize is actually incredibly relevant if you don't have a shielder in your team. If you already have a shielder in your team, it's an afterthought. But if you don't, and Crystallize gets you the Geo-Resonance, then it's incredibly important to trigger it. Given that he already seems to have his best possible teammates, weapon, and best in slot set available on release, can it be said that of all of the units in the game, he has reached his ceiling the fastest? I wouldn't say so, no. I think that he still doesn't have a good fourth teammate option. I think Zhongli's kind of cope with him. He's good, it's fine, but like, yeah, right? In order for Zhongli to actually be a good teammate for Itto, you need his pillar to always hit and generate energy, which is hard to do, like really hard to do. But at the end of the day, right, if they want to release a good unit that works with Itto, they'll just make the numbers better. They could just release a unit that buffs defense more than Goro does. They could release a unit that does off-field geo damage that's just more than what Albedo does. It's never impossible for a team to get better by getting a new unit, right? Like, even if the team is already internally consistent, they can just give us better numbers. It's always possible. Ushi or Gouba better? Ushi, not even close. What the fuck? Gouba? More like OMEGALUL, am I right? Like, what would you rather have? Gouba! Get them! Or, actually, I don't even know what Itto's voice lines are.
Attaboy!
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 Attaboy! Like, what would you rather have? Attaboy or Gouba, get them. Let's be fucking real, man. Not only Ushi's visual design better than Gouba, but also Max Middleman, I think that's how you pronounce it, is a fucking Chad. And hearing his voice lines every time you chuck Ushi is very based.
Bam!
Bam! How many logs per second does Itto generate with his utility passive? When a party member uses a tax to obtain wood from a tree, they have 25% chance to get an additional log of wood. It's rounded up 0, because who the fuck ever farms trees? When's the last time you did that? Don't lie to your... No. Is Ushi taller than Xiao? Yes, he is. I actually have proof of it. Here's a shot that has both Ushi and Xiao. And what I did is I went on MS Paint and I copy-pasted Xiao's to stack up to Ushi. And canonically, Ushi is about up to here, which is 5.5 Xiao's tall. By the way, follow me on Twitter. How many socks is one Itto in terms of height? How tall is Itto? Do we have a canonical height for Itto? 6'1". So it's about 1.8. What's 6'1" divided by 3'11"? About 1.5. 1.55. Yeah, so Itto is about 1.5 socks tall. Okay, I think that's it. I hope it helps you figure out whether or not you want to go for him. Again, don't spend money on this shit game. Itto's a solid unit, but not a necessary one. I don't have Itto on my main account. I'm not really planning on going for him on the rerun banner, and I'm completely fine without him. But he is a pretty fun unit to play, so yeah. That's it. Bye, YouTube.